parasitic worm infections, and prevention methods. Humans can be infected by parasitic worms, also known as helminths, which belong to kingdom Animalia. Parasitic helminths cause a variety of diseases in humans. Parasitic worms tend to have complex life cycles. Some stages of their life cycles take place in humans, and some stages take place in other animals, on vegetation or in soil. They cause illness in millions of people all over the world. Some types cause malnutrition in children that results in poor development and learning issues. Eliminating worm diseases requires prevention by entire communities so that the cycle of infection can be broken. Worm infections are often not cleared by human immune systems, and they persist in communities that have them. Some worm infections persist in the human body for decades. Many worm infections are asymptomatic, so that people may pass them on to others without even knowing it. There are many reasons that immune systems might fail to kill a worm infection. The immune responses to worms are different from other types of immune responses because worms are just too big to be ingested by macrophages, an important step in innate and adaptive immune responses. In contrast, bacteria, virus-infected cells, and cancer cells may all be phagocytosed. Adult worms in human bodies produce eggs which are relatively small. Most immune responses may be directed to the egg stage of the worm life cycle because they can be phagocytosed and start an immune response. Killing some of the eggs, however, does not remove a worm infection from one's body. And unfortunately, most parasitic adult worms in people's intestines do not induce strong immune responses. One type of immune response, ADCC, leads to the killing of parasitic worms. If a worm dies, then the debris will be phagocytosed by APCs. T helper cells respond to the worm antigens presented by the APCs, starting an adaptive immune response. Under the direction of T helper cells, B cells in the intestines create the antibody IgE in response to worm infections. Antibodies are large proteins that act as bridges between pathogens and killer white blood cells. Once a worm is coated with worm-specific IgE antibodies, eosinophils bind to the IgE and release cytotoxic chemicals, destroying the worm's skin and killing it. When eosinophils bind to IgE on the surface of a worm, and that's happening right over here, here are the surface antigens, here's IgE, and this also shows that it's bound to it, toxic chemicals are released. That's all these red dots here. That kills the worm, or it's also called the helminth. The process is a type of ADCC. Because many parasitic worms do not induce immune responses in the intestines, they persist in many parts of the world. This map shows the worldwide distribution of different types of trichinella, a type of roundworms. Each color is a different type. There are many ways to prevent worm infections. Here's a list of some of them. First of all, practice sanitary practices for defecation. Use flushing toilets or keep a sanitary place for elimination that is away from gardens and bodies of fresh water. Wear shoes outdoors and take them off when entering the home. Wash hands frequently, especially after using the bathroom or loo, touching fresh water, touching soil, or touching raw meat. Know that worm eggs may be found on surfaces near infected people or animals. Fully cook cuts of meat, heating to a minimum of 63 degrees Celsius, and cook ground meat to at least 71 degrees Celsius. Avoid wading in bodies of fresh water that could have snails or sewage contamination. Thoroughly wash leaves and vegetables before eating. Strict adherence to hygienic practices may help prevent infection by worms. Almost all early worm infections are treatable. Treating all infections as soon as symptoms appear can break the cycle of infection and prevent serious illness. Anti-helminth drugs include mebendazole, pyrantel, albendazole, pamoate, and diethyl carbamazine, to name a few. You can get this type of medication at a health clinic. While worms in the intestinal tract are easy to treat, untreated infections may invade muscle, lungs, the nervous system, or liver, and may be more difficult to treat. Untreated infections in children can lead to malnutrition, poor development, and learning difficulties.